Most of us think of deserts as empty, but these arid landscapes are natural, full of life.
There's something about deserts. I don't know what it is, but I really like it.
However, desertification, land that once supported people, is now losing that ability.
L'eau sera l'un des problèmes dans les 50 années à venir, quoi.
Coming up, we travel to one of the Middle East's most captivating deserts, where we explore the difference between dry lands shaped by nature and land that's been pushed too far.
Par rapport, malgré qu'on a beaucoup d'eau, on ne sait pas la conserver.
Just 2 degrees is on. Now,
do you think desertification is something that is going to get worse in the future?
most of us hear the word desert and picture emptiness. Endless sand, no life, nothing of value.
But deserts cover more than a third of Earth's land surface. They regulate heat and move nutrients across oceans, and millions of people call them home.
When people think of deserts, they usually think of heat. But that's not what makes a desert a desert. A desert isn't defined by temperature, but by a lack of rain. Scientifically, it's any region that receives less than about 250 milliliters of rainfall a year. That's less than what many cities get in a single storm. And that means deserts aren't all hot. Some are scorching, like the Arabian Desert. Others are freezing, like Antarctica, the driest continent on Earth.
Представляем с вами пустыню, мы что представляем? Пески и жару. Так вот, холодные пустыни – это те пустыни, в которых бывает при этом очень холодная зима. Это всегда очень резко континентальный климат, это очень большие перемены температуры от плюс 50 летом до минус 50 зимой. И это очень жесткие условия для жизни, которая там протекает.
Deserts form in a few main ways. Some sit under persistent high-pressure systems where sinking air suppresses clouds and rainfall. Others form in the rain shadow of mountains, where moist air drops its rain on one side and leaves the other dry and bare.
Some deserts sit far from oceans, cut off from moisture entirely, and some are shaped by cold ocean currents which cool the air so much that clouds struggle to form. Different processes, but same result: very little water.
Despite that, deserts aren't empty. They are highly specialized ecosystems built around survival. Plants may grow slowly in deserts, but they conserve water fiercely and anchor fragile soils. Animals often come out only at night, avoiding heat and conserving energy. Microbes live inside rocks and soils while they cycle nutrients. And those dry soils matter far beyond the desert itself. Desert dust, especially from places like the Sahara, travels thousands of kilometers through the atmosphere and fertilizes the Amazon rainforest and feeds plankton in the oceans.
Donc on voit beaucoup de campagnes de sensibilisation dans les forêts ou au bord de la plage, mais c'est vrai que le désert, on n'a pas encore vu, c'est assez inédit, mais c'est tout aussi important parce que c'est notre planète, c'est la même planète.
Deserts also play a huge role in the planet's energy balance. Bright desert surfaces reflect sunlight back into space, while darker soils absorb heat, influencing atmospheric circulation on a global scale. But deserts are changing. Climate change isn't just making dry places drier, it's shifting where deserts begin and end. As temperatures rise, evaporation increases, rainfall becomes more erratic, and land that once supported crops or grasslands can tip into desertification, a process driven by climate stress and human pressure like overgrazing and poor water management. And that's the real danger.
Deserts themselves aren't a problem. They've existed for millions of years. The problem is when productive land turns into deserts, pushing communities out, destabilizing food systems, and accelerating migration and conflict.
Más allá de eso, nosotros lo que vemos aquí son millones de años de evolución, ¿no? Y millones de años de evolución en ambientes extremos que también dan información, o sea, si lo queremos ver desde un punto de vista utilitario, también nos pueden servir para entender o para quizás nosotros adaptarnos.
So deserts matter. They matter for climate, for biodiversity, and for us.
Why do you like deserts?
Well, I've been here in Arabia, basically in Oman and the UAE for a long time, most of my professional life, in fact. And my specialist field academically was reptiles, snakes and lizards. And when I first came to Oman, in fact, to teach at university, that's what the research I was doing was on them. And they're mostly out in the desert. Of course, they're in the mountains as well. But I think there's something about deserts and about mountains, the kind of dry mountains you get here, the views, the air. I don't know what it is, but I really like it.
I completely agree with you. And before we get to the animals that live in the desert, which of course includes snakes and lizards, when we think of deserts, no one generally has a really good perspective on them. Television and movies have taught us that deserts were only used by the bad guys to kill people by just letting them wander free in deserts. And they eventually die, and you may actually see one or two shots of bones scattered in parts of the desert. Is media right, or have deserts gotten a bad reputation for no reason?
I think they've got a bad reputation. I wouldn't say there's for no reason, because the desert is a very harsh environment. There's no doubt about it. If you're unprepared and you don't have water and you go into the desert and it's 50 degrees, you're in trouble. So yeah, it's a tough environment. And if you go in the desert, you do find bones, camel bones where a camel's died, or a goat or something, or a fox, and the bones are whitened by the sun, and there they are. So Hollywood hasn't entirely got it wrong, but I think where the bad perception of deserts come in is people don't really understand that it is a really interesting living ecosystem. There are a whole range of animals and plants which have evolved to survive in these really harsh conditions.
But you also mentioned earlier that deserts are almost inhospitable environments at least for humans. What characteristics does a creature have to survive in a desert?
Well, I guess there's three kind of things which make it really hard, I suppose. One is the temperatures, which can vary. They can be very, very hot, of course, but not so much here in the UAE, but in other countries in winter, they can be very, very cold as well. So animals and plants have to be able to cope with a wide range of temperatures, including extreme temperatures. Then, of course, there's the lack of water, which is really critical. So animals and plants have to be able to survive without drinking or without being able to get much water, and have all sorts of adaptations to allow them to do that.
So there is water that these creatures would survive on, but they know how to find this water.
Yes and no. I mean, all animals have to have a supply of water because their bodies are made of water, but they don't necessarily need to drink. So, for example, the oryx, which is one of the larger animals you get here in the Arabian deserts, it's a large antelope. It can survive for a year without drinking.
Wow.
They don't need actual water, but they get moisture from their food. They get moisture from metabolic generation of water as they digest food, in a sense. And they are able to get water from fog, for example, or dew when it condenses on leaves, and they can lick leaves. But mostly they have very efficient kidneys, and they have a very efficient way of actually avoiding losing too much water. So, for example, their waste, they produce very, very dry feces, for example, which has almost no water in it. The cactus can store water, so when it does rain, and in most deserts there's at least some rain, at least a few times in the year, and the cactus stores the water inside, and it's got a very water-resistant coating or skin, if you like, on the surface of the leaves, which prevents water loss.
A lot of desert activity that supports life happens at night, it seems, based on what you're saying.
Absolutely. Particularly in the warmer months. And here in the desert, in the UAE, you can go out in the daytime and you look around, you won't see very much in terms of life in the desert. The sand looks pretty barren. There may be a few lizards, for example, which you see scuttling between bushes, but not much else. But if you go out early morning and you look at the surface of the sand, when the sun is low and you can see all the texture of the sand, it'll be covered in tracks. And the tracks are of beetles and maybe of scorpions and of lizards and snakes and small mammals like gerbils. They're all there, and you think, wow, there's a lot of life here, but you haven't seen it. If you go at night, that's the time you can see it. So,
I'm a latte, thank you so much.
So I work with Emirates Nature WWF, and one of the things that we like to do is to take our volunteers and other members of the public out into the desert at night so that they can see for themselves the diversity of animal life that there is. And mostly it's not spectacular animals you tend to see. I mean, there are foxes out there which are nocturnal. There are various species of cats, like sand cats and things, which are nocturnal, but very shy. We don't tend to see them. But there are beetles all over the place which come out at night. There are scorpions, which if you shine a UV light around, they glow in the dark, and you can find them quite easily.
So aside from supporting an absolutely beautiful myriad of life based on what you're saying, what are deserts good for? I mean, can the planet survive without them?
The planet can survive without them, for sure. Like can survive without many kind of habitats. But that's not to say they're not important. In terms of human importance, they're hugely culturally important for the people who live here. The people have lived here for millennia. It goes right back into their culture and history. And even today, many people will love to go out into the deserts in the evening, make a little fire. They do their falconing, which is a traditional sport here out in the desert. They sit under the stars, and it's taking them back to your roots, if you like. So for people, it's important, but of course for the biodiversity that is there, that's important in its own right. To my way of thinking, it's a whole ecosystem of organisms which are highly adapted to the particular conditions there, and it's a very fragile system as well, which is easily damaged by a whole range of different environmental stressors.
So deserts are natural, and they've existed for millions of years, been shaping ecosystems and cultures along the way. But there's a growing problem that often gets confused with deserts themselves. It's called desertification. And it happens when land that once supported life slowly loses that ability, not because nature failed, but because the balance between people and climate broke down.
Scientifically, desertification refers to the degradation of land in dry regions where soil loses nutrients, vegetation disappears, and water no longer stays where it's needed. There are two main drivers. The first is global warming. As temperatures rise, evaporation increases and soil dries out faster. Rainfall becomes less predictable, longer droughts followed by intense downpours that run off instead of soaking in.
L'eau sera l'un des problèmes dans les 50 années à venir, quoi. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire? Je ne sais pas. Le couvert végétal est très chétif en Adrar, malgré qu'on a beaucoup d'eau. Il y a beaucoup de je dirais pas de gaspillage, mais une perte énorme d'eau qui arrive. On ne sait pas la magasiner, on ne sait pas la conserver.
The second driver is human activity. Overgrazing strips land of protective vegetation. Deforestation removes roots that hold soil together. Poor irrigation can leave behind salt, poisoning farmland, and rapid urban expansion seals the ground, cutting it off from natural water cycles. On their own, these pressures are damaging. Together, they can push land past a tipping point.
we found ourselves caught in a vicious cycle that we must break. We can only achieve this if we move beyond the silos that hinder our collective action, and if we adopt a holistic approach that recognizes the constant interaction between desertification, biodiversity loss, and the acceleration of climate change.
Once soil structure collapses, recovery becomes extremely difficult, and communities that relied on that land are forced to adapt or leave.
I cambiamenti climatici in Sicilia ci sono attuali. In passato se ne parlava, ma mai avremmo potuto pensare di viverli in prima persona. Nel contesto come l'entroterra siciliano che vive di zootecnia, di agricoltura, i cambiamenti climatici appunto ricoprono un ruolo non indifferente. Sarà difficile progettare sviluppi aziendali, sarà difficile.
Globally, more than 3 billion people live in drylands, and the UN estimates that millions of hectares of productive land are lost every year to desertification.
This issue affects a lot more than the environment. It's a food security issue, it's a migration issue, and increasingly a political one. But desertification isn't inevitable. Restoring vegetation and managing water can help slow or even reverse the process.
كل مزارع لازم يتشبث بالأرض مالته مهما كانت العراقي. لازم احنا نكون أقوى. احنا مثل هاي الشجرة تنمو سنة بعد سنة ولا ما يجي يوم والزراعة تكون واحد بالموصل.
The lesson is simple, and it connects directly back to deserts themselves. Deserts aren't the enemy. The danger comes when we push land beyond its limits and ignore the warning signs.
Doctor, how widespread is desertification today? And is it more prevalent in some regions than others?
Desertification has been impacted almost 170 countries in the world. It's equivalent to 40% of the world land at the moment, and is also impacted minimum at least 3 billion of people on Earth. Yeah, that's the problem with desertification that we are facing.
Wow, 40% is a huge number. Is it reversible, desertification?
We can reverse desertification and land degradation. And at the moment, there's an effort that the government entity, private entity, and in global scale, we would like to combat desertification. There's a framework that we all together put effort. The first thing is globally, and it is a national framework and the governance rule that we need to understand who is the key player who can provide policy, budget, and reporting to understand and have the shared objective. That's the first thing that we, all the country that has been impacted by desertification, work together. And then another step is the incentive program or comply that help to move or mechanism to help support landowners to improve the behavior, such as reduce erosion in the field, improve rainfall condition, and build more storage of soil organic matter. Now, after that, we also need to understand that to reverse desertification, we have to improve landscape and watershed intervention. How can we increase the ability of the soil to store more water? And how can we slow down and spread water and increase the infiltration rate of the soil? There are several techniques that has been introduced, such as swell, contour bund, terrace, check dam, half moon, and also rehabilitation of wilding. Now, when we come to this improving or provide the landscape intervention, soil is the key element to help improve or reverse the desertification. Because when we protect soil and improve the soil function by restoration, we can rebuild the physical, chemical, and biological property of the soil and help allow the soil to retain more water, support root growth, and resist to erosion. And erosion is the key element that's called soil degraded. There are several protection methods that has been implemented to protect our soil, such as mulch, cover crop, create a windbreak, reduce tillage, and provide a residual retention in the soil after harvest. This is to limit erosion by wind and water while moderating temperature and moisture fluctuation in the soil. In sandy soil, such as in the Middle East that I'm locating in Saudi Arabia. The technology that we are introducing is called liquid natural clay technology. Liquid natural clay technology is one of the techniques that can introduce a small particle of clay platelet in liquid form into the soil profile to help create a better structure, build better aggregate, and slow down infiltration rate. When we do this, we can increase the accumulation of soil organic matter and build fertility back. Once the soil be able to retain water, start to have a better structure in the soil and build fertility, the next process is called vegetation-based restoration and production system. This system is how to introduce vegetation in the area, such as native species that have a high survival rate and also be able to improve the livelihood of people in that country, in that region.
Based on our trajectory of development, human development, do you think desertification is something that is going to get worse in the future?
If we not slow down the process of what we are doing at the moment, yes, it will. However, there's a lot of effort of several organizations, private sector and government sector try to provide the framework, taking action and monitor it. I'm very optimistic that we will be able to reduce the spread of the certification or maintaining. First thing that we all need to understand is awareness that we are creating. You are creating an interview, podcast, or video or documentary that help people to understand that the speed of the certification is very fast, but it happened beneath our feet. That's why it's unnoticeable until the impact is unbearable. Yep, that is. Thank you for doing this and create the awareness for everyone. And we as a scientist or policymaker or action taker, we are here to support with the technology to help curb the desertification. Yeah.
It's time for Just to Matter, where the little things mean everything. Today, we're in the desert, a place that looks empty but isn't. Because one of the most important forces holding this ecosystem together is small, easy to miss, and right beneath our feet.
Desert harvester ants collect seeds for food and store them on the ground. But not every seed gets eaten. Some are forgotten, some sprout. Over time, ants end up replanting parts of the desert, helping vegetation return after rare rainfall. As ants dig nests and tunnels, they loosen hard, lifeless soil, allowing rainwater to sink deeper instead of evaporating instantly. That makes it easier for plants to take root in an otherwise hostile environment. By dragging seeds, plant matter, and organic debris underground, harvester ants concentrate nutrients around their nests, Studies show soils near ant colonies are often richer and more biologically active than the surrounding desert. And that means plants grow better around ant nests. Ecologists regularly find more plant diversity and denser vegetation near harvester ant colonies. It's not intentional, just the byproduct of ants doing their daily work. But the result is pockets of life in an otherwise sparse landscape. Harvester ants are considered what's called a keystone species in many arid ecosystems. That means if they disappear, the desert loses its structure, fertility, and resilience. Deserts have always told stories of survival. Desertification tells a different one about imbalance and loss. And as the planet warms, that story is spreading. What happens next won't be decided by climate alone, but by how we care for the land beneath our feet.